Somewhere in Australia right now, there's probably a 34-year-old sitting in front of a laptop looking at a spreadsheet that says they might never have to work past 45. Sounds crazy, right? But they didn't win the lottery and they didn't inherit a fortune. They just followed a strategy that a lot of Aussies are starting to learn about called FIRE, which stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. And mate, it's actually a lot simpler than most people think. So let me break it down for you. See, a lot of people hear retire early and immediately picture someone with millions of dollars relaxing on a beach forever. But that's not really what FIRE is about. The goal isn't to stop working because you hate work. It's to reach a point where your investments earn enough to cover your living expenses, so working becomes your choice instead of something you have to do. Once your passive income can pay your bills, you've basically reached financial independence. Whether you're 35, 45 or 55 now, the whole idea revolves around one number that gets talked about a lot in the FIRE community, the 4% rule. It's based on historical U.S. market research, so think of it as a planning guide rather than a guarantee. In fact, quite a few Aussie FIRE followers prefer using something a little more conservative, like 3.5% depending on their situation. But the basic calculation is really simple. You take your yearly living expenses and multiply them by 25. If you spend about $60,000 a year, your target is roughly $1.5 million. If you only need $40,000 a year, then you're looking at around $1 million. It sounds like a huge amount at first, but once you understand how investing works over a long period, it starts feeling a lot more achievable. One thing that actually gives Australians a bit of an advantage is our own system. We've got compulsory superannuation, which means your employer is already contributing 12% of your salary into super. Even if you've never invested an extra dollar yourself, you're already building wealth without really thinking about it. Then you've also got franking credits from Australian shares, which can make investing more tax efficient than what people in countries like the US or the UK have access to. Let's put some numbers around it because this is where it starts making sense. Imagine you're 27 years old earning $75,000 a year, and you invest about $1,200 every month into a low-cost index fund. Nobody can promise exactly how much you'll end up with because returns, fees and market performance all change over time. But if you stay consistent for many years, that portfolio can grow into something pretty substantial. And if you increase your monthly investment, you simply reach your goal sooner. That's really the magic of it. Starting earlier gives your money more time to compound, so you don't actually have to contribute as much every month to end up in the same place. Here's something that surprises a lot of people though. Your income isn't the biggest factor, your savings rate is. Someone earning $90,000 but only saving 15% will usually fall behind someone earning $70,000 who's saving 40%, assuming similar investment returns. That's why FIRE followers focus so much on savings rate. Under common FIRE assumptions, saving around 10% could mean working for roughly 50 years, while saving around 50% could bring that timeline down to about 17 years. Of course, actual results depend on investment performance in your own circumstances, but you get the idea. The bigger the gap between what you earn and what you spend, the faster you move towards financial independence. Now, not everyone follows the exact same version of FIRE. There's lean FIRE, where people are happy living on a smaller budget, often under $40,000 a year because freedom matters more than having lots of luxuries. Then you've got fat FIRE, where people want enough investments to support a much more comfortable lifestyle with overseas holidays and a nicer home. And honestly, for a lot of Australians, Barista FIRE is probably the most realistic option. That's where your investments cover most of your expenses and you just work a relaxed part-time job to cover the rest, instead of staying stuck in a full-time corporate job. Super also works a little differently in Australia, and it's something a lot of beginners don't realize. Since you generally can't access your super until preservation age, which is currently 60 for most people, many Aussie FIRE followers actually build two separate investment buckets. One sits inside super where it grows tax effectively, and another sits outside super in shares or ETFs. That second portfolio is what pays your bills between the day you leave full-time work and the day you can finally access your super. Building that bridge is often one of the biggest parts of an Australian FIRE plan. When it comes to investing, most people chasing FIRE aren't trying to pick the next superstar stock. They usually stick with low-cost, diversified ETFs that track the ASX 200 or global share markets. That way they own hundreds or even thousands of companies with very low fees, and those fees matter more than people realize. Paying around 0.2% instead of 1.5% every year might not sound like much, but over 20 years that difference can easily add up to well over $100,000 because of lost compounding. That's money that could have helped you retire years earlier. Now let's clear up a few myths because these stop a lot of people before they even begin. The first one is that you need a six-figure salary. You really don't. Your savings rate matters much more than your income. Another myth is that you have to live on instant noodles forever. That's not how most people do it. It's usually about making smart trade-offs, maybe driving a cheaper car, cooking at home more often, or avoiding unnecessary upgrades while still spending on the things that genuinely make you happy. FIRE isn't about making life miserable. It's about being intentional with your money, and your own situation makes a massive difference too. Imagine a couple earning around $70,000 each, so $140,000 combined. If they keep their yearly expenses around $80,000 and invest the rest, they could realistically work towards financial independence in around 16 or 17 years. A single person earning $95,000 and investing $2,000 every month could end up on a pretty similar timeline. But once kids, childcare costs and a bigger mortgage come into the picture, that timeline might stretch out to 22 or even 25 years. These examples are only illustrations because investment returns, inflation, taxes, and spending habits are different for everyone. At this point you're probably thinking FIRE either sounds completely achievable or completely impossible. But honestly, mate, for most people it comes down to three numbers: how much you save, how much you're paying in fees, and how long you can leave your investments alone. There are also a few mistakes that quietly slow people down. Lifestyle inflation is probably the biggest one. Every pay rise disappears into a bigger mortgage, a nicer car, or more expensive habits instead of boosting investments. High investment fees quietly eat away at long-term returns. Trying to time the market usually backfires because nobody consistently knows when the perfect time to buy is. Then there's tax. Understanding things like franking credits, capital gains tax, and super contributions can make a real difference over time. And finally, plenty of people build up a healthy super balance but forget about the years before they can actually access it, leaving themselves short during that gap. There's another risk that doesn't get talked about enough either: sequence of returns risk. Imagine you retire with $1 million portfolio and then the market falls 30% right at the beginning while you're withdrawing money to live on. Even if the market eventually recovers, your portfolio might never fully bounce back because you were forced to sell investments while prices were low. That's why many experienced FIRE followers keep 1 to 3 years of living expenses in cash, so they don't have to sell shares during a market crash. Another thing to remember is that Australia's tax system is quite different from the US, and a lot of FIRE content online comes from America. Things like capital gains tax, superannuation, and franking credits all work differently here. Tax rules can also change over time, so it's worth checking the current rules before making long-term plans instead of assuming today's rules will stay exactly the same for the next 20 years. And here's something I actually find really interesting. Most people who reach FIRE don't stop working completely. They just stop doing work they don't enjoy. Some start small businesses, some do freelance work, others consult a couple of days a week or spend more time volunteering. The whole point was never to sit around doing absolutely nothing. It was to have the freedom to decide how you spend your time. One mistake beginners make all the time is chasing the highest possible return instead of the most reliable one. A boring, diversified portfolio that you stick with through every market crash often beats constantly jumping between hot investments. The Aussies who actually reach FIRE usually aren't the ones making exciting investment decisions. They're the ones quietly staying consistent year after year. You also can't ignore inflation. If your FIRE number is $1.2 million today and inflation averages around 3% each year, then 15 years from now you'll probably need a lot more money to maintain exactly the same lifestyle. That's why serious FIRE followers regularly review and update their target instead of locking in one number forever. And honestly, there's a huge mindset shift involved too. Reaching FIRE isn't just about maths. It's about changing your relationship with money for years. It means saying no to buying things just because everyone else is upgrading. It means treating your investments like a bill that gets paid first every payday before you spend money on anything else. So if you're wondering where to begin, it's actually pretty straightforward. First, work out your FIRE number by multiplying your annual expenses by 25. Then check your savings rate and see where you can free up a little extra money without making life miserable. Automate your investing so the money leaves your account as soon as you get paid. And finally, choose a low-cost diversified investment strategy and stay consistent. Don't panic when markets fall and don't chase every new trend. At the end of the day, mate, FIRE isn't just for people earning $300,000 a year or tech millionaires. For most Australians, it's really just a long-term maths problem mixed with consistency and patience. Someone on an average income who saves well and keeps investing over many years can put themselves in a much stronger financial position. The biggest difference usually isn't how much money you earn. It's whether you start today or spend the next 5 years wishing you had. If you found this helpful and it finally made FIRE make sense, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.